with the social media platform that I have, what I try to leverage is that name, that identity of being a change maker, to post videos about my work, to not only show, I think, other students, other like kids, that they can do it too. Like their age shouldn't be a barrier if they think that it is. The fact that they are still in high school or still in college, they have other responsibilities, like that doesn't need to be a barrier. The fact that they don't necessarily have like the funding, the resources, like that also doesn't need to be a barrier.
Welcome to Tribe Talk, where we alternate between young changemakers and long-standing leaders doing work in the social impact space. I'm here today with Olivia Zhang, founder and CEO of Cancer Kids First. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, Olivia, it's my pleasure. Before we begin, Tribe Talk is sponsored by Raise, a mobile-first platform powering individual activism, nonprofit fundraising, and corporate giving. So download Raise on the App Store or Google Play today to give, volunteer, or connect.
Streamer. Tribe Talk is a streamer studio production. Stream your podcast, stream your story, stream yourself. Try it free at streamr.nyc. Make your voice, brand, and message seen and heard on every platform today.
Olivia, I'm so grateful that you've not only joined us for today's session, but also are one of the cohort members of Tribe. So jumping in though, I'd like to understand more about your background, your passion, and first just how Cancer Kids First got started.
Yeah, so I started Cancer Kids First when I was 14, so I was a freshman in high school at the time. And I think that growing up, I was really passionate about service and did a lot of different, volunteering. But I think what gave me that impetus to kind of start something of my own was, I guess, like experiencing difficult things firsthand. I feel like that is always the driver to nonprofit starters and like the most successful entrepreneurs. But my grandfather, an elementary school teacher, they essentially raised me growing up because my parents, they immigrated from the US at the age of 30, and our family, we struggled a lot growing up, and so they had to work a lot of different jobs to keep our family afloat. So I spent a lot of my time under the care of my elementary school teacher and also my grandfather in China. And so when they passed away from cancer within 2 months of each other, it was a really difficult time for me. And for me, like, I think I've realized that a lot of my purpose comes from work. And in order to kind of dig myself out of this hole that I was in, I wanted to do something that I thought could honor their legacies and kind of like give their deaths purpose almost, but then also address some of the issues and, I guess, the inequities that I saw in childhood cancer, specifically when I was, visiting my grandfather and who was receiving treatment in China. So that kind of gave way to the nonprofit Cancer Kids First. And we started super grassroots, like most organizations in high school. And it was like very much me and our like founding team in our high school cafeteria, sitting at like picnic benches, like planning everything out. I did a lot of our first like logo mock-ups and website designs like in my bedroom. I pulled a lot of all-nighters trying to research, like ChatGPT wasn't a thing, so I used WikiHow on how to start a nonprofit. And so all that kind of planning and prototyping and just like basic kind of community outreach eventually gave way to the organization that we are today.
I mean, you've opened so many doors for where this discussion will lead, from the ability of technology to enhance someone's capabilities in creating their own company. I love that you talk about how this is also entrepreneurialism. And sure, we discuss this as phil-entrepreneurialism, but the fact that there is a recognition, your impact and effort, the all-nighters are not dependent on the legal status of your company. So maybe perhaps on that end, was it always assured that this would be a nonprofit, or was there any question as to how you wanted to structure this organization?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think we played around. So I actually started first by selling artwork to raise funds for my grandfather. So I guess in that end, it was more for profit. But I think for me, like just maybe byproduct of, everything that I've learned and read growing up, like I assumed that the only way forward to like make an impact was through the nonprofit space. So we kind of always started knowing that we wanted to make it a nonprofit or like some sort of like community project if we didn't get approved to be an official like 501(c)(3).
Right. Tell me more about the experience starting something on WikiHow and how, as technology has progressed alongside your organization, you've been able to use new tools to move faster, increase your impact, things of that nature.
Yeah, no, I think this is always something super fun to talk about, especially now where we are with like AI and everything. I think that definitely in like the first 2 years, it was like incredibly like grassroots in the sense that we were always like distributing and printing flyers. Like I didn't even realize that Gmail, you can only email 500 people max at one time. So I was like individually emailing all our volunteers. Like I had no idea how to use different communication platforms like Telegram, WhatsApp, Remind. And we didn't really plan all that out either. So I think in the very beginning, it was we had so many different moving pieces, like we were using so many different, I guess, tools, but they were all like the old school tools, like Gmail, for instance. But then the pandemic, honestly, gave us a lot of time as a team to like sit back and reflect on how technology could be used to streamline all these processes. So that was the first time when we thought about like using social media for marketing, and that's definitely a huge reason why we've grown so big so quickly. But also like on the front with like emailing, like I mean, this maybe was common sense, but we didn't realize that we could use like MailChimp, for instance, to like do mass emails a lot quicker, like using platforms like I guess now we use like Discord, but before we were using like Remind and Telegram, like all these like different communication tools have been a lifesaver when it comes to like communicating to all our volunteers. And especially when we expanded internationally, being able to talk to people abroad, especially like hospital directors who maybe only use WhatsApp. So understanding, I think, those nuances and getting or allowing technology to essentially like bridge these connection gaps was super, super cool to kind of witness. And then like now having our team members, a lot of them are a lot younger than me and like well versed in how to use like AI and different platforms like that. So they are always introducing new tools to like enhance like our team meeting slides or things like, I mean, this for instance, like doing interviews and like recordings with like patients, like how we can use technology to kind of help with those services. So it's been really cool to see, I think, like looking back since 2019, how many new like technology platforms that we've integrated into kind of our nonprofit from both the operation standpoint and also for like our volunteers and patients.
Right. And I mean, certainly in the, what now, 6, almost 7 years that you've existed, you've grown to over 40,000 volunteers. Do you think that using those tools or technologies at the start, you would have grown faster?
Mm, I think yes, for sure. But I think something I'm really grateful for is are those 2 beginning years that were super difficult because I think we learned like for instance like going outside and standing in the cold for like 3 hours trying to sell like 100 cupcakes like me and I just remember me and my two team members that were there, like we were so scared to talk to strangers. And every time we got rejected, we like didn't want to speak to anybody else anymore, But like learning that humility and like how to pitch ourselves verbally in person, I think that was so critical to set a foundation for our later successes. And same thing with like having to cold pitch and cold email, like all those people and go in person to again like pitch Cancer Kids First. I think that set such a solid foundation for understanding like our why and how to best sell to individuals. Whereas like I think if we some organizations I see now like they first start off with social media because that's just the way to go, nowadays. I think that they learn quickly how to maybe communicate a message online, but then when it comes to that like critical like in-person pitching, they don't understand that as much, or when it comes to like really digging deep and thinking about how they can be a better leader themselves, just in terms of like growing confidence and things like that, I think it's harder to develop those skills. So I would say that yes, it probably would have helped us grow faster, quicker, but I think that like the skills that we gained by doing all of these like in-person kind of like more grassroots efforts and like having to put in that hard work, I think taught us a lot more.
Right. I completely agree. There's so much to learn from failures and going through the hard routes. And also, even on Tribe's end, when we're asked about scaling in New York, our solution has always been in-person conferences. And having broken 100, that allows us to really understand the city. Whereas I think if we just stayed online, repurposed that time for outreach, perhaps we would have met more people, but the quality of connections, it's the standing in the rain with 100 cupcakes that bonded you to your other coworkers and colleagues and allowed for you guys to know that you're in it together. You're making mistakes and succeeding together. Whereas there's just a little less personal touch when you're over a screen.
Yeah, exactly. Like I feel like it's synonymous. I mean, my parents, I mean, they're immigrant parents, so they'll always be like, back in my day, like I had to trek to school like for 30 miles and like you just get to ride in a car. Like I think there definitely is something to be said about having to like go through hardships, because only then can you, I think, build character and I guess like also really appreciate the success that you achieve once you achieve it. Whereas if you were to just streamline through life in general, like I think it's very applicable to anything in life, where if you were to not face anything difficult necessarily, like it's not, I think, as worth getting to like the end point or the end goal.
Right. And I think you definitely live with a lot of intention. I mean, getting to meet you at the summit was an incredible representation that you, alongside the other changemakers, all exercise 6 times a week, maintain a rigorous schedule in order to be such incredible changemakers while still in college and lead large organizations. But at the same time, too, when you mention your start and what happened to you there, I think there's a lot of direction. Right, you decided to make impact and divert yourself, perhaps distract yourself with work from what was going on. But when you think back to that moment, especially as things have scaled and you've gone on many more talks and expressed this work, do you think about what kind of helped you with jump starting and getting started into doing things yourself?
Yeah. I I feel like people often ask me if I had like a specific moment where I like all of a sudden realized that I need to, I guess, enact change. And I I just remember feeling obviously like incredibly sad about losing the two people I cared most about, but also just being in the environment that my grandfather was living in. Like my extended family grew up in really difficult conditions and they never knew when the next meal was. And so he just seeing him go through treatment and seeing the hospital facilities like the way other families were treated and the lack of access that they had versus like the incredible privileges that I had in the United States. I think that discrepancy was something that really bothered me.
Right.
And I think thinking on that, I just felt like if I was in a position where I was in the US and I was receiving such a great education, like I had a platform, like I could use social media, or I had like high school friends who I could talk about and like elevate and raise awareness about this issue. AKA like I had like the means and I guess knowledge to perhaps make a difference. I almost felt like it was my obligation to do so. So I think that honestly was a huge, I guess, like starter point as well for like kind of pushing me to want to do something and take initiative like myself to address this problem.
It was your obligation to do so. Yeah, I think something that you've touched upon multiple times is you have a lot of gratitude for things that many take for granted. The United States education system and things of that nature are natural for you to see and perceive this difference because of the immigration of your family, but also it's incredible to see that there's action. At the same time, I appreciate that it's not that there's some magic spark like there is in cinematography that changes everything, but it's the reality that you see every day that slowly builds the opportunity for you to take action and do something. Right? That's really inspiring to encourage other people to get started, that they don't need to wait for something to hit or come, but they can actually just look at what's already happened in their life and decide what impact they want to make.
Yeah, I think that was beautifully said, honestly.
So, okay, let's allow me to brag about you for a little bit, right? Because certainly it's better to come from other people. But you have done some incredible work, and I think you should be most proud that you've been highlighted for doing so, right? Because there are so many people who do work in silence or in the backdrop, and there are those who advocate for others to get involved, right? You've been recognized by Prince Charles. You've had TED Talks. You are L'Oreal Women of the Year for this year, and the youngest one of this year, correct?
Yeah.
So, like, how do you recognize that you've become your own brand as a young changemaker, as well as through the work you're doing in Cancer Kids First? And how do you use that definition, that identity, to encourage others to take impact or to make the most of their lives as you have?
I think it's great that more people are trying to give young people a voice, and they care more about like social impact change makers, hence why there's all these different award programs and what Tribe is doing, for instance. And I think that I never realized that it could almost, like you said, like become a personal brand in a sense, but it has been really cool to kind of fall into this identity because, for instance, like with the social media platform that I have, what I try to leverage is that name, that identity of being a change maker to post videos about my work, to not only show, I think, other students, other like kids that they can do it too. Like their age shouldn't be a barrier if they think that it is. The fact that they are still in high school or still in college, they have other responsibilities, like that doesn't need to be a barrier. The fact that they don't necessarily have like the funding, the resources, like that also doesn't need to be a barrier. And so I feel like posting my authentic like day in their lives like that will hopefully remove those barriers for them, and then also giving advice. Like sometimes I'll film like 10-minute long, like where I just sit and talk, and I don't know why people like to listen to me, but I will talk about like how I like did mass mobilization from my high school, how like what cold email strategies I used to like first reach out to businesses and partners. And I think like being able to give those like give that advice that I wish I, had when I was younger, and not having to source it from like 87 different websites, rather like it coming from one person who I really admired and like wanted to kind of move in that direction. I think like sharing those videos have been helpful in making sure that I'm able to almost like share, I guess, my journey and successes with people, and hopefully elevate and create this kind of new generation of change makers who will step up after.
Right, sharing your journey to elevate new change makers. And to dive in on that, Mark, I mean, certainly you are young, but that has not stopped you from your work. I'm very curious, how do you demonstrate that it is not your age that impacts the quality of your work? I think that's also the entire thesis of what Tribe is arguing, is that someone's age doesn't impact the quality of their work. It's instead their mission, their work ethic, their drive, and that there's also this youthful not only recognition of new technologies and tools, like we are getting pretty adept quickly, it's all that we know, but also that there's a youthful innocence and optimism and hope that we can leverage to make the future what we want it to be.
Yeah. I think that, I mean, now I think it's a lot easier because we have this like credibility that we've already established in the nonprofit space, and we're able to use our stats, like the 40,000, like 10,000 patients helped, in like pitch emails, for instance, if we're talking to adult sponsors, or different more established organizations, companies. I think when we were starting out, it was very much what I realized is like you just have to think about it from a almost like psychological perspective. So understanding like humans are humans. So they connect with personal stories, and that's what like we would just always lead with why this cause was personal to me and how experiences and losses, like going through that directly, ensures that I have like a deep tie and like a commitment to the cause. Because I think something that adults are really afraid of is like a lot of high school students will start organizations and then go off to college and drop it, and then they leave behind this entire like vulnerable population that depended on this organization's needs, but the kids were just doing it for college apps or something else, kind of like non-altruistic purposes. And so really iterating like your personal tie to the mission, I think definitely helps. And then also, I think being able to almost like leverage what makes young people unique, which is how I think familiar we are with digital technology. Like we know how to use social media better than anybody else. We know how to use digital platforms better than anybody else. Also the fact that young people like we have there's no other time I think when our lives when geographically we have so many people in our area that we can mass mobilize, you know, whether that's like in high school, like on your sports teams, like your school clubs, things like that. And I think adults realize that there's this like entire population of people, entire generation of people who can like help with volunteering, help donate, raise awareness, all these things. And we are in a unique position to actually reach these people because we are the young people. And so I think like being able, like sometimes we'll have to like convince companies that like we can do like a social media post that can help reach more people than they can. And so that's why they should work with us. So kind of like leveraging these, you know, assets, I think is like how we've been able to throughout the years like build up kind of like a reputation, like get people to trust us.
Right. I mean, at the same time, youth do not have nearly as much financial capital as our parents or grandparents, right? There's a cyclical wheel, but you're right that there's also so much activism, and we are connected through schools, educations. But at the same time, there's still the understanding that you've taken what most see as like purity action and continued it beyond the typical bounds. Right, for tribes, for example, we say, what do opportunities in college mean for people in high school? We actually have seen many that have started nonprofits and then drop them when they go into college, like you said, but only because they didn't see a route forward, like there is for consulting, banking, pre-med, things of that nature. So you, on the other hand, did not stop when you went into college, even without the existence of programs, things of that nature. So what was it that allowed you to continue when everything gets flipped? You go to college, you're isolated from your family, from your friends, from the peers that worked with you in the cold as you're trying to sell cupcakes at the start, and now you're on your own trying to connect over a screen. Like, how did you guys keep going?
Yeah, I think for us specifically, maybe it was slightly different just because I think Kids Are Kids First became so integrated into my identity. Like it felt like it was a part of me and I couldn't, and I still can't to this day, like imagine never doing it again. Like it's the first thing like I think about when I wake up, like when I go to bed, that's all I think about. Like I have dreams about it and I'll like keep like notepad next to my bed in case like I wake up from a dream and I have a great thought and then I'll want to like write it down somewhere. And so I feel like because it became so integrated into my life, it was very like certain that when I got to college, like that wasn't me being in a different school environment was not going to change like my passion about it and my commitment to it. I think also because of the international scale we were able to achieve, it had almost taken off from like this local, I guess, organization where I think like if most of our team members were still in Virginia, where I grew up and where it was like founded, and if most of our volunteers, like our patient centers, were all like centered in Virginia, I think that definitely would have been a different story. But I think because of the fact that due to the pandemic and social media, we were able to expand internationally so quickly, there was almost like chapters and like people already set in place in different areas that were doing and carrying on the work, you know. So it didn't matter as much that like the CEO was moving to a different city. Um, and it also meant that like with our chapter system, for instance, it meant that we again had this like already established like system of governance almost where you can see impact like trickle down like from the headquarters down to like localized regions. So I think because it was already like running efficiently on its own almost like it made sense to kind of continue it.
Awesome. Yes, I think the fact that you leveraged technology to reach new areas that you weren't physically located in is what allowed you to, this is what I'm hearing, that allowed you to continue because it wasn't dependent on where you were, because it had already eclipsed where you were. That's amazing, right? That is the whole thesis of this next generation in wave, that you can take something and grow it beyond your local town because you can reach people beyond your local town. That's the beauty of social media, right? You can make friends with people, and not just friends that are like there to support you and encourage you in whatever you're doing, but actually work with you and become colleagues. So to dive from that though, how did you grow the people that worked with you outside of your home that you didn't actually know yourself in person.
Yeah, I think seeing like the change in our team has been really cool because we will host like grad parties for our seniors. And before, like, we had probably like 12 Virginia directors show up, and now there's like three of us, which is insane. But that means that majority of our team now is like all across the US, and some are even internationally in Canada. So that's been really fun to experience. And I think with time, like, the quality of our directors have also improved because we've been able to source talent from like diverse places across the world. But I think a big part is definitely like in alignment with our volunteer base growing and like the name getting out there more through social media, through partnerships with other organizations, companies, using different like volunteer platforms like Idealist. I think that also meant that like our name brand grew, right? And so Cancer Kids First is now like very well known in the youth-led nonprofit space. And naturally, that means that for individuals who are interested in service or even like being like a fundraising director or like whatever, they know that Cancer Kids First is like a reputable nonprofit that they could, work at, for instance. And so we will get like hundreds of emails from just volunteers who will ask if they can, if there are like positions open when we like send out Google Form applications now for opening up leadership team positions, it's sent to all our like volunteers, all our chapter directors, on our social media. And so I think having that again like established presence already, like that allows us to kind of like reach more people and hit like different areas.
Reaching more people. I mean, I think that's the name of the game, especially when your nonprofit very particularly is focusing on an externality to the market, right? You're trying to address something that current systems cannot, right? And building a community around it so that other people can get involved. You're boosting other people's careers, certainly, and other youth getting involved in Cancer Kids First because they get to share what they're doing, learn from it, practice and train. But how do you individually express gratitude, really, for the people that are supporting?
Yeah, so I mean, gratitude is a huge part of my life, and I know that I wouldn't be here today without the mentors who have supported me in my leadership journey and my career successes. And so I think one way that I really try to like focus on doing is every time I see an opportunity, whether that be, and I'll give some examples like a press feature, um, I'm invited to speak like on a podcast, and like I'll pass it on to another director who I think has been doing really great work and want their story to be highlighted. I was offered this like internship job in New York, and that was something that I thought was really cool that a lot of our directors would be interested in. And it was kind of related to Cancer Kids First. And so I extended the offer to our leadership team members. Things like award opportunities like the Diana Award that came around again. And so I reached out to a couple directors who I thought were super deserving of the award and had done really great work with our nonprofit, and I offered to nominate them. So things like that, I think I'm basically trying to pass on like what my mentors did for me. I think it's really important to give other people spaces to be recognized and opportunities like that to like elevate their careers and try new experiences and get access to things like that where otherwise they may have not been able to. So I think that's like a big way that I try to show gratitude. Obviously like doing minor things like if somebody does a project really well, like I shout them out in our leadership team group chat. Our HR managers have also done an incredible job of like implementing this kind of recognition system where we have annual like Cancer Kids First Director of the Year awards. So that person gets like a personalized care package for them. Obviously, they get like a certificate and like a shout out on all our social media platforms. We do the same thing for like our volunteers. So I think that's like a nice special way for them to be recognized. We also like to celebrate like our directors' birthdays, and a lot of our directors have said that like receiving like 50 texts in a group chat on their birthdays like has made them feel really special. So even minor things like that, just doing small things like those awards and like shout outs, I think goes a long way. Obviously like on different leadership team meetings we'll also host, we'll sometimes shout out directors who have done really well. And I think for the upcoming Thanksgiving one, we're gonna try to do like a gratitude activity where we pair directors together and have them write something that they're grateful for about each other. I think that's a great way to kind of like spread that two-way kind of gratitude system. A lot of it is we put a lot of thought into what our directors want and also what people in general like to receive, which is definitely a shout out when they're doing good work. Um, oh, I guess like alongside the opportunities, like giving opportunities approach, we also invite like famous people or really successful people who have done great work in like their careers, whether that be um like a founder like starting a company, or a lot of our directors are pre-med, so like a really successful doctor. We'll have them come in and do like a webinar for our directors so they get like career advice and get to hear from that person specifically. I think things like that, like again, it's just showing your directors that you know them and what they care about, and you're giving them opportunities and resources because they're part of our organization.
Right. I think what's very clear to me is that you help people not only advance opportunities within Cancer Kids First, but you're really helping the individual advance their life's careers. Right? You're using it as a platform to promote those that work in support of this mission. Right? And so that's in general, regardless of the type of company, the type of leader that people want to follow. Right? Someone who's actually looking out for them and their identity as an individual instead of just their role in a company.
Yeah, exactly.
So, Olivia, I mean, thank you so much for coming on today, for sharing your perspective, for sharing the great appreciation you have for Cancer Kids First, the impact that you've already made, and the foothold you've created for future youth to step on top of as they go on and develop what they're aiming for.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Tribe Talk is a streamer studio production. You can view more at www.tribe.us. That's tribe with 2 I's. Try Streamer today at www.streamr.nyc. We're very grateful to the team that made this happen. Executive producer David Walters, videography and editing by David Walters, graphic design by Tristan Bresnan, and hosted by me, Kyle Mathis. Thank you so much for watching.